There is a moment in every great story where the mask comes off. Where the carefully constructed image, the humble athlete, the team player, the loyal soldier of samurai Japan, cracks under the weight of something real. Something ugly. Something that cannot be edited out of the footage or buried in a press release. That moment happened in Miami. And the man at the center of it was not a villain from another country. He was not an opposing batter or a hostile manager from a rival team. He was Japan's own cleanup hitter. The man who was supposed to be Shohei Ohtani's most trusted partner in the middle of the samurai Japan lineup. Munetaka Murakami did something in Miami that people inside the Japanese baseball world are still struggling to fully describe. What happened was witnessed. It was felt. And when Murakami walked toward Ohtani afterward with an outstretched hand and what appeared to be an apology forming on his lips, Ohtani looked at him, turned away, and refused. Shohei Ohtani, the most composed, the most disciplined, the most forgiving presence in any locker room he has ever entered, refused the handshake. That single moment tells you everything you need to know about how serious this was. Today, we go inside the full story. To understand why what happened in Miami was so explosive, you first need to understand the weight of the moment those players were standing inside. The WBC quarterfinals are not a regular baseball game. They are not a spring training exhibition or a regular season fixture where a bad day can be absorbed into a 162-game schedule. Every at-bat in a WBC quarterfinal carries the pressure of an entire nation. Every decision a manager makes will be analyzed for years. Every player on that field understands that their name will be permanently attached to what happens in those 9 innings. Japan had arrived in Miami as the defending champions. The target on their back was enormous. Every team they faced had spent months studying their tendencies, their patterns, their vulnerabilities. And within that pressure cooker, team unity was not simply a nice concept, it was a structural requirement. The difference between a championship team and an early exit almost always comes down to what happens in the moments that the cameras do not catch. The conversations in the dugout. The body language between at-bats. The invisible threads of trust that hold a group of elite individuals together when everything is on the line. Those threads were about to be cut. Manager Hideki Ibata had built this version of Samurai Japan on a specific foundation. Respect. Preparation. Collective identity over individual ego. He had watched the way Ohtani moved through the team environment, the way he listened to younger players, the way he ate his meals with quiet discipline, the way he prepared with a seriousness that made everyone around him want to raise their own standard. Ibata had constructed the lineup and the culture around that standard. And then came the Emperor's attendance game. In Japan, the presence of the Emperor at a baseball game is not a ceremonial footnote. It is an occasion that carries the full weight of national identity, cultural tradition, and collective pride. Players who represent their country at such a moment are not simply athletes. They are, in the most literal sense, representatives of everything Japan understands itself to be. Every player in that Samurai Japan lineup understood this. It had been communicated clearly. The preparation, the conduct, the standards expected, all of it had been elevated specifically because of who was watching. Every player understood it. Except, on this day, Munetaka Murakami appeared to forget. What Murakami did during the Emperor's attendance game has been described in various ways by those present. Some call it carelessness. Others call it arrogance, the particular arrogance of a player who has achieved enough that he has begun to confuse his talent with permission. Others describe it more plainly as disrespect, not accidental, not born of stress or confusion, but rooted in an attitude that had been building for some time. The specific behavior involved a public display of attitude that was visible to teammates, to coaching staff, and to observers in a setting where conduct carries symbolic meaning far beyond the baseball field. The details, as reported by those close to the situation, paint a picture of a player who was not mentally present in the way the occasion demanded, and who, when the gap between his behavior and the standard of the moment became visible, chose dismissiveness over correction. Teammates noticed. The coaching staff noticed. And most significantly, Otani noticed. People who have spent time around Shohei Ohtani consistently describe the same quality. He sees everything. Not in an aggressive or suspicious way, but in the way that a person who is deeply present in every moment naturally absorbs what is happening around him. He notices who is eating what before a game. He notices which younger players are nervous and makes a quiet joke to loosen them. He notices when someone's preparation has been sloppy and says nothing publicly but adjusts his own behavior in a way that communicates the standard. What he saw from Murakami during the Emperor's attendance game was not something he could quietly adjust around. It was not a moment of nerves or an off day. It was something that, in Ohtani's understanding of what this team was supposed to represent, crossed a line that preparation and talent cannot erase. Sources close to the team say that Ohtani's expression during and after the incident was something that his teammates had never seen before. Those who have played alongside him for years describe him as almost uniformly composed, not emotionally flat, but regulated. A man who processes difficulty internally and presents calm externally. What they saw in Miami was something different. They saw anger. Not shouting. Not confrontation. The kind of anger that is more unsettling than both of those things, quiet, still, and absolute. Murakami, to his credit or perhaps simply out of instinct, recognized that he had done something serious. After the game, in a moment that multiple sources confirm, he approached Ohtani. He extended his hand. He began what appeared to be an apology. Ohtani looked at him. Turned away. Walked in the opposite direction. For a man who had publicly praised Murakami's talent, who had encouraged younger players through far sharper provocations, who had built his entire public identity around grace and composure, this was not a casual gesture. This was a verdict. The news reached manager Hideki Ibata in stages, the way difficult information usually travels through a team hierarchy. First came the reports from the coaching staff who had witnessed the behavior during the Emperor's attendance game. Then came the secondary accounts, the players who had seen the aftermath, who had watched Ohtani's response, who had felt the shift in the locker room that follows when a team's most respected voice withdraws trust from someone. Ibata did not make his decision immediately. That is not how he operates. He gathered information. He spoke to people he trusted. He considered the baseball question, Murakami's power, his presence in the lineup, the very real impact of removing your cleanup hitter from a quarterfinal game, alongside the human question, which was larger and more important. The human question was this: what does it mean for this team, for this culture, and for everything that Samurai Japan is supposed to stand for, if the behavior during the Emperor's attendance game is met with silence? Ibata understood something that purely results-focused managers sometimes miss. Team culture is not built in the good moments. It is not cemented by the walk-off hits or the perfect pitching performances. It is built, or destroyed, in the moments when a standard is violated and the people in charge have to decide how much that standard actually means. He made his decision. Munetaka Murakami would not be in the starting lineup for the quarterfinals. When Ibata informed Murakami directly, those who were present described the conversation as brief and unambiguous. Ibata did not present it as a tactical choice. He did not offer the comfortable fiction of a matchup-based decision or a form slump. He told Murakami plainly what the reason was. And he told him what would be required, not just on the field, but as a person, if he ever wanted to fully reclaim his place in this team's trust. Murakami said nothing. News of Murakami's removal from the quarterfinal lineup spread through the Samurai Japan camp the way important information always does in a closed team environment, quickly, incompletely, and with enough gaps that different players filled them in differently. Some of the younger players, those who had grown up watching Murakami hit some of the most important home runs in Japanese baseball history, struggled to process it. Murakami was, by any objective measure, one of the most talented players on that roster. His exclusion was not a statement about his ability. It was a statement about something that cut deeper than ability. The veterans understood more quickly. Kensuke Kondo, who had experienced his own moment of raw emotion earlier in that same tournament, said nothing publicly. But those who watched him in the hours after the announcement describe a player who carried himself with a particular kind of quiet dignity, the dignity of someone who had processed his own pain and arrived somewhere on the other side of it. The most significant response came, as it so often does, from Ohtani himself. When asked by a teammate, indirectly, carefully, whether there was a path for Murakami to rebuild what had been broken, Ohtani's answer was not a dismissal. He did not write Murakami off. He did not perform the kind of public grace that would have been easy and hollow. Instead, he said something that those who heard it have returned to repeatedly in the days since. He said that talent is the beginning of the conversation, not the end of it. That what a player does between the white lines is only meaningful if it is built on something real off of them. And that the standard he held himself to, the diet, the preparation, the respect for teammates and opponents and the occasions that baseball sometimes becomes part of, was not something he had invented. It was something he had chosen. And the choosing, not the talent, was what separated the players who lasted from the players who flickered. Nobody in that locker room said anything for a long moment after he finished. Munetaka Murakami is not a finished story. He is one of the most gifted right-handed hitters Japanese baseball has produced in a generation. His talent is not in question. His future is not sealed by what happened in Miami. Players have returned from worse moments. They have rebuilt trust that seemed permanently shattered. They have done the work, quietly, consistently, unglamorously, and arrived somewhere worth arriving at. But the road back begins with an honest reckoning. Not a press conference apology. Not a well-crafted social media statement. The kind of reckoning that happens privately, internally, in the space between who you have been and who you are capable of becoming. Manager Ibata removed him from the quarterfinals not to end his career. He removed him because the standard had to mean something. Because a uniform, and especially a uniform worn in front of the emperor, represents something that cannot be subordinated to personal attitude or individual ego. And Ohtani refused the handshake not out of cruelty. He refused it because he understood, better than perhaps anyone alive, that a handshake without the work behind it is just a gesture. And gestures, in the world he inhabits and the standard he has spent his entire life building, are never enough. Miami will be remembered for the baseball. For the lineup decisions, the pitching matchups, the moments of individual brilliance that WBC tournaments always produce. But inside the walls of that locker room, what will be remembered is simpler and more human than any of that. A man extended his hand. And another man, who had earned every right to define what respect looks like in that building, turned and walked away.